don't know if you've heard about this. We haven't talked about it that much over the last few days, but there is a heat wave that is rolling through Colorado this weekend.
I feel like I can already feel it now on the desk. It's been said that these are really good stress tests, though, for women's cardiovascular systems, oftentimes hitting women harder than men. So breaking this down with us today is 9 News medical expert Dr. Payal Kohli. Lucky us girls, once again, something else we got to contend.
Something special for you.
Every time. What's the scientific evidence here for men versus women with really big high heat?
They have looked at this a number of studies in Europe, and they found a 56% higher risk of heat-related death in women as compared to men. But what's really interesting here is if you break it down, it really varies by age. So it's pretty much about the same. In fact, men can even be higher when they're younger. But when you think about women over the age of 65, definitely over the age of 85, that's when you really start to see a significant increase. So it's really our older women that we worry about the most. But across the spectrum, we think that women can't tolerate heat as much as men, and there's biological reasons for that.
Right, so you think it, and there's evidence to back it up. So how do we have to treat the heat differently?
Yeah, so think about it, Phil. Women sweat less than men. It requires actually higher temperature for us to start to sweat. And then when it comes to hormones, that also plays an impact. So in premenopausal women, we know that progesterone can change the way that our body gives off heat, the way that the blood vessels open. That's called vasodilation. So there are phases of our menstrual cycle called the luteal phase where we actually don't give off as much heat. We can be more prone to getting warmer. And then women have more fat on their body compared to their mass, and they carry it differently. So that fat also serves as insulation. So put all that together, that means the women out there need to be extra careful this weekend, especially if you're pregnant, especially if you're older, especially if you live alone, because you're at much higher risk of heat-related illness.
So when we say be careful, I mean, there's the obvious, right? Try to stay somewhere shaded and cool, hydrate, but like, is there anything extra we should be thoughtful of? Or like, is there a symptom we should be watching for? Like, this is when you're in a danger zone.
So there's actually a spectrum of heat-related illness. We tend to think of heat-related illness only the kind of more extreme versions of it, whether you talk about heat stroke, heat exhaustion. Those are the two sort of more severe forms. But even in its mild form, where it starts to give you headaches, make you a little more tired, make you feel like you're dragging, sometimes some people will even get a heat rash. These are all things to start to watch out for, that you're starting to have some signs of heat-related illness. Now, I do want to emphasize the hydration. For men and women, you need to drink around the clock, even if you're not thirsty, because when you're hot, you may not even have the same sort of thirst receptor triggering as, because your thermoregulation is affected as your body should. So it may not tell you that you're thirsty. So if you get thirsty, by definition, you've fallen behind. So I actually suggest both of you guys this weekend get the biggest water bottle that you can find, fill it up with ice water, and start to drink to cool yourself from the inside out.
But if I'm following this correctly, her bottle needs to be just a little bit bigger.
Her bottle needs to be bigger. And if for postmenopausal women out there, they're even higher risk because the estrogen also plays a big role. So we know that what is the biggest sign of menopause? Hot flashes. Oh, estrogen is very much involved in regulating our body's temperature, so that's really important.
Does this have any, I know this isn't what we're talking about, but does it have anything to do with why in a household women are colder than men? Is this a body temperature thing too?
It can be.
That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yes, because our thyroid, our hormones, our fat distribution, all of these things make it different so that women generate their body heat differently. Now, every single organ in our body is very susceptible to temperature. So that's one thing, our body needs to operate on this very tight window of temperature. And the way that we cool ourselves, we have a little gland in our brain that's sort of the thermostat, and then our sweating mechanism is the air vents. So that's how I want you to think about it. So the thermostat triggers the air vents to open up and sweating. But if we can't sweat as much, or we can't conserve heat as much by closing the vents, that's part of the reasons we're more sensitive to temperature.
Settling marital arguments across Colorado. Last thing before we let you go is let's talk about like urban heat islands. What does that mean? Because we hear about like canopies and trees and little segments of town that are hotter than others.
This is huge, okay? So we live in an urban heat island. Denver is an urban heat island because when you live in the city, by definition, you're in an urban heat island because there's asphalt, there's concrete, there's roofs, all of which absorb the heat, actually give it off at night. Now compare that exact same temperature to a rural environment, it's actually going to feel less hot for our bodies. And there's of course more shade as well when there are more trees around. So by definition, by living in an urban or suburban area, you are feeling the heat more. And then of course, we've just talked about how women's bodies react to the heat differently. So combining the two together, especially here in the city, we're definitely going to need to be more careful this week.
The heat on top of the elevation. Drink, drink,
and
drink.
the elevation.
That's what I get. Yes.
Exactly. Yep.
All right, Dr. Kohli, thanks as always.